July feels late, like you've already missed the window everyone else planted their garden months ago. That feeling is actually backwards, since the soil right now is warmer than it's been all year. Warm soil is exactly what pushes roots to establish fast before fall even shows up on the calendar. Nurseries know this too, which is why so many are clearing out mature perennials at a discount right now. So instead of waiting for next spring like everyone tells you to, you plant now while the ground works for you. By the time autumn rains arrive and the plant goes dormant, it will have had months to build real roots. That's a head start a spring-planted version simply won't have, no matter how well you care for it later. Next year, while everyone else babies tiny new seedlings, yours will already be established and thriving. I've got 11 of these lined up, and the one at number 8 is one most people walk right past. Let's get into it, starting with a plant that earns its spot for being nearly impossible to kill. Number 1 is the perennial sunflower, and I want to be clear, this is the kind that comes back every year. That's different from the annual sunflower most people know, which dies off at the end of the season. Plant it somewhere with full sun, and give it about 2 feet of space since it spreads underground. Within a year or two, it will naturally fill that space on its own without any extra effort from you. The soil doesn't need to be rich at all, and too much fertilizer actually causes it to flop over badly. Poor, well-drained soil is genuinely where this plant performs at its absolute best. Water it deeply once a week while it settles in through July's heat, then you can mostly back off. Once established, these plants handle drought without any issue, which is part of why they're so forgiving. Most people don't realize perennial sunflowers bloom later than the annual kind, often through early fall. That means a July planting isn't behind schedule at all. It's actually perfectly timed for that bloom window. If you want more plants next year, you don't even need seeds. Just divide the root clump in early spring. That's your entire propagation method, and it costs you absolutely nothing extra. There's a practical reason this earns the top spot on a low-effort list. It's genuinely hard to kill. I've seen these survive weeks of neglect that would wipe out half the other plants on this list entirely. If you're the type who forgets to water during a busy week, this is the plant that forgives you for it. It's a genuinely great starting point for anyone brand new to growing perennials from scratch. Plant number 2 is Blazing Star, which is often sold in nurseries under its botanical name, Liatris. This one grows from a corm, similar to a bulb, though it stores energy a bit differently underground. You'll usually find it either as a potted plant or as a bag of dry corms, and July works fine for either. If you're planting corms, set them about 3 inches deep, pointed end up, in well-drained, sunny soil. It genuinely does not like sitting in soggy ground, so drainage matters more than almost anything else. Here's the detail I find genuinely interesting. Blazing Star is native to North America. It's one of the few plants that certain specialist pollinator bees actually depend on to survive. These aren't just generic pollinators. Some bee species evolved specifically around this plant's bloom cycle. If you care about real pollinator diversity, not just butterflies for a nice photo, this plant delivers that. The flower spikes bloom top to bottom instead of bottom to top, which is a small but noticeable detail. It's the kind of thing that makes people ask what it is the moment they spot it in your yard. Deer tend to leave it alone too, which isn't something you can say about most tall, showy perennials. Once established, maintenance is really just watering during dry spells and cutting back spent stalks. You'll often find these sold in mixed color bundles at nurseries around this time of year. Planting a cluster of 5 or 6 together, rather than spacing them out, creates a much stronger visual impact. Think in drifts, not single stems standing alone and scattered awkwardly across the bed. That clustered look mimics how Blazing Star naturally grows in the wild across open prairies. The third plant on this list is Blue Fescue, and this one isn't grown for flowers at all. It's an ornamental grass, and what it brings to a July planting is instant texture from day one. You're not waiting for it to bloom or mature, it already looks finished the moment you put it in the ground. Plant it in full sun with well-drained soil, and don't overthink the size if you're starting from a nursery pot. A gallon-sized pot going into the ground is plenty to get this grass established quickly. It forms a tight, mounding clump of narrow, silvery blue blades that hold color even through peak summer heat. Once established, which usually takes about 3 to 4 weeks of regular watering, you can mostly forget it. This is one of those rare plants where a little neglect actually works in its favor rather than against it. Overwatering is actually a bigger risk here than underwatering, which surprises a lot of new gardeners. If your garden bed feels a little flat or too uniform in texture, this plant breaks that up instantly. It also holds its shape through winter in most zones, so you're not left staring at bare dirt later. That year-round structure is exactly the kind of detail that makes a garden feel intentional, not just seasonal. It also pairs beautifully with flowering perennials, giving them a calm backdrop to stand out against. Number 4 is rose verbena, and this one is genuinely fast in the most literal sense of the word. From a small nursery pot to a spreading mat of blooms can happen in just a few weeks under July heat. That makes it one of the best instant gratification perennials on this entire list, hands down. It likes full sun and well-drained soil, spreading low and wide rather than growing tall and upright. That habit makes it perfect for filling gaps at the front of a border or spilling over a raised bed edge. One thing worth knowing, rose verbena is considered short-lived, usually sticking around for 2 to 3 years. If you love how it looks, take stem cuttings every couple of years to root fresh new plants easily. That way you're never really starting over, you're just quietly refreshing the same planting. It can slow down a little past 90 degrees, worth knowing if you're gardening somewhere brutally hot. It recovers fast once temperatures cool, and those pinkish purple blooms keep coming well into September. What stands out most about this plant is how forgiving it is when it comes to placement in the garden. It doesn't need a perfectly designed bed. Just tuck it into a gap and let it do its job without complaint. For a low-effort list, that flexibility matters just as much as how quickly the plant actually grows. Watch your local nursery for discounted mature pots this time of year, since this one is short-lived anyway. There's no real reason to pay full price for something you'll likely propagate from cutting soon regardless. Its low spreading habit also makes it a great choice for softening the harsh edge of a concrete path. The 5th plant is Calamagrostis, specifically the Blue Star variety, and it's genuinely underused. Most gardeners have never even heard of this one, which is exactly why I wanted to include it here. It handles heat, humidity, and drought once established, putting it ahead of many more popular perennials. Here's the detail that actually sold me on it. Deer and rabbits tend to leave it alone completely. If you've ever watched something beautiful get chewed to nothing overnight, you know why that matters so much. The flowers are small, daisy-like, lilac-colored with yellow centers, and they simply don't stop blooming. This isn't a one-time bloom flush, it produces continuously from summer straight into fall. A July planting gets you color almost immediately, and that color keeps going for months afterward. Planted in full sun to light shade and reasonably well-drained soil, watering consistently the first few weeks. After that, it's remarkably low maintenance for how much visual payoff it actually delivers. I almost skipped this one since so few people know it, but it's outperformed far more popular plants for me. If you want something nobody else on the block is growing, this is probably the easiest way to get there. It's also a wonderful filler plant to weave between showier perennials without competing for attention. Plant number 6 is sweet coneflower, not to be confused with the purple coneflower everyone already knows. This one is native to the United States and actually thrives in clay soil where other plants struggle. If there's a patch in your yard where nothing seems to grow, this is worth trying before giving up on it. There's a surprising detail here. The foliage has a faint anise smell when brushed against. That scent is enough to make deer think twice before nibbling, which works better than most people expect. Give it full sun, water during establishment, and expect golden yellow blooms with dark centers by midsummer. It's hardy across a wide range of zones, so most people planting in July can expect it back reliably next year. It also grows tall, sometimes reaching 5 to 6 feet, making it perfect for the back of a border. If your yard is giving you nothing but trouble, heavy clay that cracks in summer, this plant often proves it wrong. It also self-seeds gently over time, filling in gaps naturally without ever becoming a nuisance. Number 7 is red hot poker, botanically known as Nipophia, and it fixes a garden that feels too pastel. It originally comes from southern Africa, which explains why it handles heat and drought so effortlessly. The flower spikes are exactly what the name suggests, tall torch-shaped blooms in fiery orange, red, or yellow. Plant it somewhere with full sun and well-drained soil, since soggy winter ground is what it can't tolerate. If your yard tends to hold water, raise the bed slightly, or work in some grit before planting this one. Here's something most people don't realize. Red hot poker is genuinely salt tolerant. That makes it a surprisingly good option if you live near the coast or deal with road salt runoff in winter. Hummingbirds are drawn to those tubular blooms almost immediately once the flowers open. The grass-like foliage stays attractive even when it isn't blooming, unlike a lot of showier perennials. So it earns its space in the garden year-round, not just during its brief few weeks of peak color. It's a striking focal point that instantly draws the eye toward the back of any sunny border. The eighth plant is hibiscus, the one I mentioned earlier that most people walk right past at the nursery. It usually shows up as a small, unremarkable-looking plant that gives no hint of what it eventually becomes. What it becomes is enormous flowers, some blooms reaching up to 8 inches across, among the largest around. Despite looking almost tropical, hardy varieties handle winters down to zone 4 without any real issue. In my experience, this plant gets the most comments from neighbors simply because of that flower size. Give it full sun and consistently moist soil, since it drinks more water than most perennials on this list. Give it plenty of space too, since even compact varieties can reach 3 to 4 feet tall and wide. Planting in July means it'll spend the rest of the season building roots before its full show next summer. One thing worth knowing, since it emerges late in spring, some gardeners assume it died and dig it up too early. Be patient. It's normal for hardy hibiscus to show no life until late spring, then explode within weeks. Once it does, it easily becomes the single most photographed plant in your entire garden all summer. Number 9 is bearded iris, and this one flips the script on almost everything covered so far in this list. It actually prefers dry, well-drained soil and needs very little water once it's settled into the ground. The blooms are intricate, ruffled, almost architectural, and they come in nearly every color you can imagine. Even after flowers fade, the sword-shaped foliage holds structure in the bed, which a lot of perennials can't offer. One thing to do before planting, the rhizome needs to sit right at, or just barely below, the soil surface. Bury it too deep and it simply won't bloom well, which trips up more beginners than almost anything else here. Plant it in full sun, and in humid climates make sure air can circulate around the rhizome to avoid rot. This is a long-term investment. Dividing the clumps every 3 to 4 years gives you plenty to share. The bloom period is relatively short, usually a few weeks in late spring, but the wait is worth it. A July planting gives the rhizome a full season to settle in before that first bloom cycle finally arrives. Patience really does pay off here in a way that few other perennials on this list actually demand. The 10th plant is bee balm, or monarda if you want to use the botanical name for it. This is one of those plants where the smell actually hits you before the flowers even register visually. Crush a leaf between your fingers and you get a bright, minty, slightly citrusy scent that's genuinely unexpected. It's a magnet for pollinators in a way that's honestly a little dramatic to witness in person. Bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds all show up for this one, often within days of the first blooms opening. If you've struggled to build a real pollinator garden, bee balm tends to be the plant that finally changes that. One thing worth knowing, it can be prone to powdery mildew, especially in humid climates with poor airflow. Space your plants generously and avoid overhead watering late in the day to mostly avoid that issue. It's not dangerous to the plant long-term, but it does look unsightly if it takes hold in your bed. It spreads by rhizomes and can get assertive over a few seasons, so many gardeners give it its own dedicated space. If you've never grown it, honestly, the smell alone is worth the price of the plant on its own. Newer mildew-resistant cultivars have made this a much easier plant to grow than it was even a decade ago. If you tried bee balm years ago and it struggled, it's worth giving an updated variety another shot. It's a plant with real history too, used in teas and folk remedies long before it became a garden staple. Before we get to the final plant, there's usually something quietly standing between your plants and full potential. Maybe you water on schedule and choose the right varieties, and still some plants slow down and lose vigor. The problem is rarely the plant itself. It's usually hiding in the small daily habits nobody notices. Some plants push through heat, drought, and neglect and keep going, like the ones we've covered already today. Others struggle at the first sign of difficulty, and understanding why changes how you care for everything. That's why I want to point you toward the free guide on building genuinely resilient plants in your own garden. It covers the habits that actually strengthen a plant and the small mistakes that quietly weaken it over time. You'll find the link pinned in the first comment below if you want to check it out for yourself. Now, out of everything covered so far, which one are you actually planting first this weekend? Drop it in the comments. I'm always curious which ones make it into people's carts versus just sound nice. Number 11 is a nice hyssop, specifically the Blue Fortune variety, and it's a perfect note to end on. It's one of those plants that quietly outperforms almost everything else once late summer heat really sets in. The foliage has a minty, almost licorice-like scent when brushed, which surprises people the first time. From July through September, it's covered in long spikes of lavender blue blooms that butterflies can't resist. This particular hybrid is sterile, meaning it won't seed itself aggressively around your yard like some mints do. You get all the pollinator benefit without the spreading headache that similar plants often bring along. The one thing to watch closely is drainage, since the roots can rot if they sit in consistently wet soil. If your ground tends to stay soggy, raise the bed slightly or mix in some coarse material before planting. Beyond that, it's remarkably low effort, and once established, it shrugs off heat that would stress weaker plants. I've grown this one for a few years now, and the length of its bloom period genuinely surprised me. Most perennials give you a few weeks of peak color, but this one gives a solid 2 to 3 months straight. That's right through the hottest, most exhausting stretch of the gardening season, asking for very little back. It's also one of the few plants here that pollinators seem to genuinely prefer over everything else nearby. Plant it next to something else in bloom, and watch where the bees actually go first almost every single time. There's a reason this plant has stuck around in old-fashioned herb gardens for such a long time. Beyond pollinators, the leaves have a long history of being steeped for tea with a mint and mild licorice flavor. You don't need to use it that way to enjoy having it around, but it's a nice bonus if you like dual-purpose plants. Give it about 18 inches of space when planting, since it forms an upright clump rather than sprawling out. It pairs beautifully next to something looser and trailing, like rose verbena or catmint for nice contrast. Expect it to reach 2 to 3 feet tall, enough to hold its own without towering over everything nearby. One more thing worth mentioning. This is a plant that genuinely gets better with age over time. The first year after planting, you'll see fairly modest growth as it focuses energy below ground. By year 2 and 3, the clump fills out significantly, and the bloom show becomes noticeably more dramatic. If you're planting in July, next summer you'll already see a stronger show than most people expect that early. It's the kind of plant that quietly rewards patience more than almost anything else on this whole list. So that's 11 perennials, and if you've been paying attention, none of them really asked for much. A little attention while they settle in, and then they mostly take care of themselves after that. That was really the whole point of putting this particular list together in the first place. July isn't the leftover month for gardening, it's the month where the soil does half the work for you. If you take just one thing from this list, remember that thriving plants aren't the ones babied every day. They're the ones matched to the conditions they're actually planted in, which does most of the heavy lifting. Match a heat-tolerant plant to a hot, sunny bed, and a moisture-loving one to a spot that stays consistently damp. Half the battle is already won before you even put a shovel into the ground that day. It really is that simple once you stop fighting the conditions and start working with them instead. That's really the difference between a garden that fights you every summer and one that mostly runs itself. It's not about secret tricks or spending more money on fertilizer, it's about picking the right plant for the spot. Every plant on this list earned its place because it shows up, settles in, and keeps going without much hovering. If you're new to gardening and this felt like a lot, don't worry about memorizing the entire list at once. Even planting 2 or 3 of these this month puts you ahead of where most gardens are heading next spring. You don't need all 11 in the ground by Friday. Just start with the one that caught your attention most. Get comfortable with it, and build out from there next season once you're feeling confident. And if you've been gardening for years already, I hope at least 1 or 2 of these gave you something new to try. Sometimes the most reliable plants in a garden are the ones nobody's talking about simply because they're not flashy. That doesn't make them any less worth growing in your own backyard this year at all. Sometimes the best plants are the ones that just quietly do their job season after season. If you want to build real strength into your garden, check the free guide pinned in the first comment below. Now, get out there and plant something worth keeping this July while the soil is still on your side. If this helped you plan your next planting weekend, drop a like and subscribe for more gardening tips.